It was March 3, 1991. United Airlines Flight 585, a Boeing 737, was on final approach to Colorado Springs after a routine 17-minute flight from Denver. The sky looked pristine, yet something sinister lurked. Suddenly, the aircraft rolled violently, pitching straight down. In just 10 horrifying seconds, 25 lives were extinguished in one of aviation's most perplexing mysteries. At 9:40 a.m., the calm of the morning shattered. On board Flight 585, Captain Marcus Thorne, a veteran pilot, and First Officer Sarah Jenkins, one of the airline's pioneering female flight officers, expertly navigated the powerful 737. Despite heavy turbulence warnings, the crew remained composed. Air traffic controller David Miller in Colorado Springs Municipal Airport cleared them for runway 35, noting winds gusting up to 29 knots. As the plane descended, local resident Arthur Vance, driving near the airport, felt a violent crosswind rock his vehicle, a mere moment before disaster. From the control tower, David Miller watched in disbelief as Flight 585, just 1,000 feet above the ground, abruptly spun out of control. There was no struggle, no call for help. The jet plunged, nose first, into a fire-blackened crater. Rescue workers arrived within minutes, but the scene was apocalyptic. The 38-ton aircraft had been pulverized, its remains scattered across an area smaller than a football field. There were no survivors. All 20 passengers and 5 crew members perished instantly. Colorado Springs had become the site of an inexplicable tragedy.
By nightfall, National Transportation Safety Board investigators converged on Colorado Springs. Their mission? To piece together the shattered remnants of Flight 585 and uncover why it fell from the sky. Investigator Thomas Reed, a human performance specialist, was tasked with examining the critical question of pilot error. He carefully reviewed the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder. What he found surprised him. The crew was exceptionally skilled, their communication calm, professional, even lighthearted. There was no indication of panic or error. In fact, First Officer Jenkins had even suggested adding extra speed as a safety margin, a suggestion Captain Thorne agreed with. Their last recorded words reflected a highly capable team caught off guard. Thomas Reed's initial impression leaned away from human error. With pilot error seemingly ruled out, the NTSB turned to mechanical failure. A critical first step was examining the engines. Technicians discovered dirt drawn deep into the turbine blades, confirming the engines were spinning and operational at impact. Hydraulic pressure gauges, though damaged, also showed indicator needles had been jarred against their faceplates, proving the hydraulic system was functioning normally. With engines and primary hydraulic systems cleared, suspicion honed in on the plane's flight controls, particularly the rudder at the tail. The rudder, a large movable surface, is crucial for steering the aircraft. It's operated by a power control unit, or PCU, which converts the pilot's gentle foot movements into the force needed to move the enormous rudder. The heart of the PCU is a dual servo valve, a complex component with 2 slides directing hydraulic fluid. Lead engineer Mark Jensen painstakingly examined the PCU from Flight 585. Inside, he found tiny metal chips floating in the hydraulic fluid. This was a disturbing discovery. Could microscopic debris jam the delicate servo valve, rendering the rudder uncontrollable?
Jensen took the damaged PCU to Parker Hannafin's labs in California, the unit's manufacturer. There, he was assured that filters prevented such chips from reaching the critical valve. Despite lingering suspicions, no conclusive evidence emerged to link the PCU or servo valve to the crash. Without a smoking gun, Mark Jensen was forced to sign off on the tests as a pass. With mechanical causes elusive, attention shifted to the weather. Meteorologist Dr. Alina Petrov investigating reports of strong winds, specifically wind rotors, invisible, highly turbulent downdrafts found in the lee side of mountains. There was a history of such phenomena causing aircraft accidents, like the BOAC 707 near Mount Fuji in 1966. Eyewitnesses, including local resident Arthur Vance, reported powerful gusts of wind that day. However, Flight 585's flight data recorder showed no sudden upward spike in altitude, which would indicate encountering a wind rotor's low pressure zone. The recorder instead showed a rapid, uncontrolled descent. The weather theory, like the others, remained unproven. Months turned into years. The NTSB had meticulously investigated every angle: crew performance, weather conditions, aircraft systems, and thousands of other data points. Yet the cause of Flight 585's crash remained a baffling enigma. For only the 4th time in its history, the NTSB released a report stating the cause of an aviation accident was undetermined. Investigator Thomas Reed described the frustration as akin to tracking a serial killer, leaving no answers, no closure, and no way to prevent a recurrence. The mystery of United Flight 585 hung heavy over the aviation world, a dark cloud obscuring a potential systemic danger. Almost 2 years after the inconclusive report on Flight 585, the unthinkable happened. On September 8, 1994, U.S. Air Flight 427, another Boeing 737, was nearing Pittsburgh on a clear, windless evening. Captain David Chen and First Officer Michael Stevens were preparing for landing. They joked about the smooth flight, looking forward to being on the ground in minutes. Then, without warning, the jet rolled sharply to the left. "Hold on, hold on, hold on!" cried First Officer Stevens. "Nothing!" The pilots fought for control, but the aircraft plunged into the ground. "427 emergency! Oh God, no!" were their last terrifying words. Rescue crews arrived quickly, but the scene was horrifying. All 132 passengers and crew perished. The devastation was so severe that the crash site was declared a biohazard, marking a grim first in U.S. aviation accidents. Aviation expert Robert Stone, a 737 pilot himself, was asked to join the NTSB investigation team. Lead investigator William Harris knew immediately that this investigation would be long and painstaking. He saw something terribly familiar in the wreckage. As investigators combed through the debris and analyzed flight data, striking similarities between Flight 427 and the unsolved Flight 585 began to emerge. Both were Boeing 737s, both crashed on final approach, both rolled violently and plummeted at full power, and in both cases, the crews were caught completely off guard, unable to regain control. Flight 585 rolled right, Flight 427 rolled left. The engines of 427 were also found to be fully operational at impact.
However, there was one critical difference: the weather. While Flight 585 had encountered turbulence warnings, Flight 427 flew on a perfectly calm evening. There was no wind shear, no rotors, no atmospheric disturbance whatsoever. This crucial distinction eliminated weather as a common factor, intensifying the focus on the aircraft itself. The NTSB was under immense pressure. Two identical aircraft, two mysterious crashes. If they couldn't find a cause, the entire 737 fleet, the world's most popular commercial jet, might face grounding, threatening the airline industry itself. An undetermined conclusion was no longer acceptable. Miraculously, much of U.S. Air 427's tail and rudder remained relatively intact. This was an unprecedented stroke of luck. Lead engineer Mark Jensen, who had examined 585's PCU, was again tasked with investigating the mechanical aspects. The intact components offered an unparalleled opportunity for testing. The PCU from Flight 427 was sent to Parker Hannifin for detailed analysis. Again, tiny metal chips were found in the hydraulic fluid, just as with Flight 585. But again, Parker Hannifin and Boeing maintained their filters prevented any interference. Mark Jensen sought any scratch marks on the servo valve slides that would indicate jamming, but found none. He put the servo valve through countless operational tests, trying to force a failure. Yet it passed every single one, performing perfectly within parameters. Once again, the mechanical components offered no clear answers. The frustration was palpable.
With mechanical failures still unproven, the investigation was forced to reconsider pilot input. Flight 427's flight data recorder showed a rudder hard over, meaning the rudder was deployed fully to one side for about 20 seconds. Investigator Thomas Reed listened intently to the cockpit voice recorder. The crew's distress began the moment they flew through the jet wash of a Delta Airlines 727 ahead of them. This momentary jolt, though common, seemed to trigger an unexpected reaction. First Officer Michael Stevens, who was flying, grunted, an unusual sound for a pilot in control, typically indicating extreme exertion during an emergency. By cross-referencing the CVR and FDR, Thomas Reed confirmed that Stevens' grunts began a split second after he pushed down on the rudder pedal, 3 to 4 seconds after the wake turbulence. It appeared First Officer Stevens had applied full rudder and held it there as the plane plummeted. This raised a chilling question. Was he deliberately trying to crash the plane? No. The recordings clearly showed a frantic struggle, not a suicidal act. The crew reacted quickly, but nothing they did seemed to help. The rudder was hard over, but was it pilot input
or pilot reaction to an uncontrolled rudder movement. The distinction was critical and still unclear. Two 737s, two strikingly similar crashes, and still no definitive cause. Investigators were running out of leads, haunted by the undetermined conclusion of 585. The pressure was immense. Lead investigator William Harris had nightmares about a third crash, imagining himself before Congress, explaining why he hadn't grounded the fleet. The NTSB needed a break, and fast.
On June 9, 1996, the break arrived. Captain Kevin Riley was on final approach to Richmond, Virginia in an Eastwind Airlines 737. Without warning, his jet rolled sharply to the right. He fought the controls, pushing the yoke in the opposite direction and standing on the left rudder pedal, but the pedal wouldn't move. For over 30 harrowing seconds, the 737 flew in a precarious right bank. Then, just as suddenly, the unknown force released its gret, snapping the wings back to horizontal. Captain Riley immediately declared an emergency, but moments later, the plane rolled again. For another 30 seconds, he wrestled with the controls, the rudder pedal still unresponsive. He braced for impact, telling his first officer to look for a dark, unpopulated area. Then, inexplicably, the forces let go a second time. Captain Riley, with remarkable skill, brought the crippled aircraft in for a high-speed landing. His legs shaking, he picked up the PA to address his terrified passengers, but found himself speechless. The next day, NTSB investigators descended on Richmond. This was a gift, an intact 737 that had experienced a mysterious rudder incident and a living pilot to tell the tale. Captain Riley's testimony was clear. He applied full left rudder, but the pedal felt jammed, and the aircraft continued to roll right. This was alarmingly similar to the final moments of flights 427 and 585. Investigators quickly removed the Eastwind PCU for examination, but once again, when tested, it performed perfectly. The ghost in the machine remained elusive. After 5 years of relentless investigation, lead investigator William Harris knew he needed to push harder. A colleague mentioned a military test, subjecting hydraulic actuators to thermal shock. This involved rapidly changing temperatures to extreme levels. Harris decided to apply this theory to Flight 427's PCU.
On August 26, 1996, in Valencia, California, NTSB investigators gathered for a dramatic torture test. The PCU was blasted with nitrogen gas to simulate the minus 40 degrees Celsius temperatures found at 10,000 meters. Then, superheated hydraulic fluid was rapidly injected, and the unit was commanded to operate. Everyone watched, holding their breath. The actuator moved left and right, left and right. Then, it stopped. It jammed. It was not commanded to stop. Lead engineer Mark Jensen immediately ordered the valve disassembled and scanned for scratches. He found none. This was it. Not only had they proven that the valve controlling the rudder could jam, but it did so without leaving any physical trace. This was the smoking gun they had been searching for, the explanation for an almost perfect crime. But the surprises weren't over. As a Boeing engineer meticulously reviewed the data from the thermal shock test, he discovered something even more profound. The numbers indicated that the valve, at the point of jamming, had actually reversed its function. This was a stunning revelation. The servo valve could not only jam, but under specific extreme conditions, it could also cause the rudder to move in the opposite direction of the pilot's input. Imagine driving your car, turning the wheel right, and the car veering violently left. That's what these pilots faced. They were pushing the rudder pedals to correct a roll, but the rudder was inadvertently making the situation worse, pushing them deeper into a deadly spiral. This explained why First Officer Michael Stevens on Flight 427 kept his foot on the rudder pedal, thinking, "Why isn't the plane going right?" He was unknowingly steering the aircraft straight into the ground.
This discovery provided a chilling yet complete explanation. The interaction of extremely cold metal and superheated hydraulic fluid could cause a minute but critical internal seal in the servo valve to bind and critically misdirect the hydraulic pressure, reversing the rudder's action. The pilots, trained to instinctively react to a roll, were inadvertently amplifying the problem. With the mechanism of the servo valve reversal now understood, the NTSB revisited the unsolved case of United Flight 585. Going back to Colorado Springs, they could re-examine the flight data recorder with this new understanding. Captain Marcus Thorne's seemingly inexplicable actions, a slight pedal input followed by a violent, uncommanded roll, now perfectly aligned with the rudder reversal phenomenon. The failure mode matched the flight data recorder from both aircraft like a glove. The NTSB finally reissued the accident report for Flight 585, attributing the cause to the rudder's power control unit. The impact of this decade-long investigation was monumental. The FAA directed Boeing to redesign the 737's rudder dual servo valve to completely eliminate the potential for reversal. Boeing spent hundreds of millions of dollars replacing these critical valves on thousands of 737s worldwide. Furthermore, new training protocols were implemented to help pilots understand and react to unusual in-flight events, including rudder hardovers and reversals. Had the crews of Flight 427 and 585 possessed this knowledge, investigators believe they might have landed safely.
It took the NTSB 10 years to unravel the mystery of Flights 585 and 427, the longest investigation in aviation history. Some dissenters in the aviation community still debate the findings, but the subsequent replacement of all 737 servo valves and the absence of any similar crashes since stands as a testament to the NTSB's persistence. This grueling investigation, driven by unwavering dedication, transformed a baffling series of tragedies into a cornerstone of aviation safety. It underscores the profound commitment to learning from catastrophe, ensuring that the skies, while unpredictable, remain as safe as human ingenuity can make them.